Hi, this is Mr. Westcross, it's Moustache, and here I am talking about the Year 10 mock exam, looking specifically at the crime and punishment bit. The aim of this video is two or threefold. First of all, I'd like you to complete the mock exam review sheet that you've got in front of you. And obviously this video focuses on the left-hand side on crime and punishment. On there, you want to be writing general targets in terms of like how to make generally your answer better, but you can also be putting specific things on there as well. And then, once you fill that in, I want you to, in green pen, be rewriting parts of answers or adding extra paragraphs or redoing bits of it to show me that you've understood how to improve your answer. Right, let's get into it. Okay, so this question, explain one way in which law enforcement medieval period was different from the modern period. All right, what I'd say here is that one is quite a key factor there, that word one. So what the exam board's done is they've produced this here, okay, which kind of gives us the impression of what to do. So first of all, what they've done is they've begun up here by talking about the change in policing. People have done pretty good on that. The law enforcement depend on the community action, but in the modern period there's a professional police force. And then what you then need to do is you then need to develop that point by talking about how the police operate at this time, okay? So it might be that you haven't talked about the police per se, although I think you have to with the title law enforcement there. But what I would say is try and pick something, tell me a difference, and then develop that theme. That's the idea of kind of developing a theme is what I would advise you to do. So they've talked about the police and then they've given more details about how the law enforcement for the police has changed, okay, in this period, okay, using the ideas of technology and what evidence you can find after a crime has been committed if you don't have eyewitness accounts, all right? So look at yours, make it up to 4 marks, as I say, try and use the same point explained right through, okay? Okay, so this is the first question which you may have done, and in fairness, I think it is the one to do. I don't think the question on deterrent is a good one to do at all. It's really difficult. So the question here is about the role of local communities, okay, being the most important factor affecting law enforcement in the Middle Ages. Now, the first thing that you need to do is you must have an intro and a line of reasoning, okay? So you could say local communities was the most important factor affecting law in the enforcement in the Middle Ages. And you might say, even though the church had an influence, it wasn't as significant as the role of local community, because often the church only came in for small sections of society through the church courts, or when the local community couldn't decide on a person's guilt, such as with trial by ordeal, which was largely only used if the jury couldn't decide. So therefore, my line of reasoning is that the local community is the most important because they are most involved with the law enforcement for most crimes, okay? Now, obviously, just looking at this then, if we get into the paragraphs, we all need to write about the local, that's falling over, we all need to write about the local community. That's why I've put 1 to 9 there, okay? And what I've done as a system here is I've used to say how widely were they used in the Middle Ages. So the hue and cry, tithings and juries were all used throughout the Middle Ages, Anglo-Saxon, Norman, and the later Middle Ages period. That's why they're in green, okay? And that would help to perform part of your argument. You can see there, apart from constable, everything on the local community is used throughout the period. And you can't say the same, can you, just looking at the colours for the other two? All right, so you need to talk about the hue and cry and the tithings and the juries, and also the constable, which is something that kind of comes in the later Middle Ages. Remember, it's appointed for 1 year, you get to volunteer, it's unpaid, and it's somebody who's kind of important in the village and committed to keeping crime down would join that. So, men, at the end of the paragraph, what I would say is that point about the local community being used throughout the period, not just in one area. Then we're going to move over here to the influence of the church, and everybody who's got a target basically of 4 or higher needs to include this. Obviously, trial by ordeal was mentioned in the question. That's in green because it was used throughout. The church courts is only coming in really in the Norman era and in the later Middle Ages. The benefit of the clergy is something that's coming in just in the later Middle Ages, and sanctuary comes in the Norman era as well. So, and what I will be saying here is I'll be explaining what these things are, but I'll be going back to my line of reasoning which says local community was the most important factor, and saying that these things only came in after the local community had done their work. And so they were less important, so like a secondary thing, and also only for certain people like who were involved in the church courts. That would be my idea. And then in the influence of the king's authority over here, okay, what I would say is this is for those people looking for 7 or higher, 3 paragraphs. Again, the sheriffs were used throughout, okay, but the idea of a sheriff's posse is something that's only used if the criminal escapes a hue and cry. So even though it's used in the whole period and put in by the king, so a royal official, it's not as significant because it doesn't deal with as many crimes as a hue and cry does. And then the coroners, royal judges and royal courts come in later on, and again, coroners introduced in 1190, all unnatural deaths are recorded. So what you can see there, even just by laying a little plan out and then colour coding, using my knowledge of when they were used, you can see that the middle one there is the main one, okay? Did the local communities have the biggest impact on law enforcement? For the most of the Middle Ages, yes, they were. Were they the first point of call when a crime had been committed and law enforcement had to be started? Yes, they were. So that would be my argument for this one. Have a look at yours. Make sure you've got the 3 paragraphs. If you haven't, use the tables here. Add in the extra detail, and then make sure that your line of reasoning is clear throughout. Okay, so we come to this question, which some people attempted, even though when we did it in class, we realised it was a very, very difficult question to answer. And the main premise of that is that nearly every punishment that deters people, or something that humiliates them or removes them, well, that's also a deterrent as well. So there's a bit of an issue here, okay? But what I would say is if I was going to answer this question, which I wouldn't do, but some of you have done, so let's have a look and see where we are. Now then, main punishment. So I've got in the middle there mutilation and fines. They're in green because they were used throughout the Middle Ages and the early modern period. So basically for the whole of the period under study. Now, my line of reasoning would be that the main purpose of punishments was to deter people because virtually every punishment deterred people in some way. That would be my intro. It's very difficult to write a good line of reasoning for this. Then I'd go straight into my main paragraph about deterrent. Again, that's 1 to 9 because we all need to be writing about that. I'd talk about mutilation and I'd talk about fines, okay? Now, you've got some examples of vagabonds. You get a hole burnt through their ear, the first offence. People in brandy with hot irons. Everyone knew they were criminals. Sometimes had their hands cut off as punishment in the Middle Ages. So you can see that mutilation runs right through the period, as do fines. You've got the Wehrgild in the Middle Ages, and you're still having fines in the early modern period, okay, to try and deter people. This is the main form of punishment because it's the main... because all punishments deter people. I don't know, I think that's kind of what you'd have to argue. Then you've got the removal of people from society, okay, over here. Now, both of these, transportation and capital punishment, are only... or capital punishment should be in green, shouldn't it? Capital punishment should be in green, used throughout the period, of course, but transportation is only used at the very, very end of the period, 1660s onwards. So the last 40 years, basically, is transportation. Capital punishment should be in green. Let me try and make it green. I don't know why I've done it. There you go, green, okay? Used throughout the period, okay? And you can see that the Middle Ages mainly used as treason, but could be used for repeat offenders or forest law after we introduced them. But in the early modern period, it was often used more gruesomely. The gunpowder plotters, the Bloody Code from 1688 increased the number of crimes could you receive the death penalty. So that runs right through, okay? And you could argue even that remove the people from society. Transportation is not something that's used widely, only, as I say, after the 1660s in this case, and only to America. So don't be writing about Australia, because that's not in the time period, is it? Which is a mistake some of you made, okay? So, yeah, that's that. And then finally, we can look at the humiliation. And both these two I've picked from the early modern period. The ducking stool for women who argue to disobey their husbands. Ducking stool in the local river or pond. Very much a humiliating idea. And the idea of carting, being paraded around the streets on a cart for all to see, aimed to shame the criminal, was used for vagrancy. What I would say is that you need to make sure, like in my table, I've got 3 clear paragraphs from this. At the end of the paragraph, we should have the line of reasoning running through them. And we should think about, was deterrent the main reason for punishment because it affected the whole period and for all crimes? And basically what I would say there is yes to that little tick. And that will be kind of my conclusion. But this question is very difficult. And of the 2 you had to choose, I would never have picked this. But if some of you have done, I've still put the video together to see how to improve it. So let's make sure we get our work now, get the paragraphs in there, and go from there.